show. This month we are talking about Kupuna services. And in studio we have Lindsay, Ilagan, Program Manager of Kupuna Food Security Coalition with the Hawaii Public Health Institute. Kupuna Wiki is Hawaii's senior resource. We talk to the best local professionals in the state regarding topics such as real estate, senior housing, estate planning, finance, and health. That our Kupuna families can find the best resources in the midst of a life transition. We strive to make sure our seniors are informed and supported every step of the way. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Brandon Lau,
And I'm Andrew Leon.
your host for the Kupuna Wiki radio show.
If you missed any of our shows on here, the Kupuna Wiki radio show is available as a podcast and can be found on both Spotify and Apple for your listening pleasure. Our title sponsor for today is Teen Brooks Choice Advisors, providing you with the best real estate information so you can make the most informed decisions. As they like to say, real estate is about choice. To contact them, call 753-9033.
And now we have our real estate tip of the week brought to you by Cheney Brooks Choice Advisors.
According to the 2019 and 2020 National Pet Owner Survey conducted by the American Pet Products Association, 67% of U.S. households own a pet. This includes over $60 million and 47 million cats. When purchasing or selling a home, homeowners are encouraged to chip their pets in advance of moving. Moreover, updating your contact information for your pet's chip is critical too.
For more information on how to assist your pets with either housing or finding a pet-friendly neighborhood or building, contact Cheney Brooks Choice Advisors at 753-9033. Again, today we have the pleasure of speaking with Lindsay Ilagan, Program Manager of the Kupuna Food Security Coalition, which is a part of Hawaii Public Health Institute. Welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on our show. Well, tell us a little bit about the Kupuna Food Security Coalition and how you got involved there.
Sure. So the Kupuna Food Security Coalition is facilitated by a nonprofit organization that I'm a part of. It's called the Hawaii Public Health Institute, or High Five for short, not hippie, which aims to be Hawaii's hub for health for all populations, but including our Kupuna. And so we bring together community partners and community-based organizations, government agencies, academia, foundations, all sorts of partners to improve the health and quality of life for the people of Hawaii.
And how did you personally get involved with the Kupuna Food Security Coalition?
So I'm a program manager at Hi-Fi, and so my role is to really convene our partners that are part of the Kupuna Food Security Coalition. We have about 40 or so partners that all come together for the shared vision of No Kupuna Hungry, and we want to make sure that not only are their food security needs met, but also that they have all the resources they need to age in place and to live healthy, fulfilling lives. And so that's kind of my role in it, but my background is in public health more generally. I used to work in chronic disease management, and so I kind of shifted over to Kupuna Food Security, and it's just been a tremendous blessing. Kupuna is always has a soft spot in my heart because I was raised by my grandparents, and so many people in Hawaii are. So it's just such gratifying work to me, and the Hawaii we know today was built on the contributions of our Kupuna, so it's really the best way possible to use my public health expertise in this way.
That's so true. So it sounds like this is a passion for you.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's definitely a privilege.
Now, with 40 or more partners with this Kupuna Food Security Coalition, I mean, it's quite an undertaking. How did this all come about?
So we originally formed as a rapid emergency response to the pandemic. So if you recall, about a year ago, as amidst stay-at-home orders and our grocery stores were running low on food, and we saw the effects firsthand on all of our families and people living in Hawaii. But I think Kupuna have unique challenges in getting food and meals and ensuring that they have access to food. And so we had a lot of community partners willing to mobilize quickly, and we just needed kind of a more strategic plan in place to make sure that we were deploying our services equitably, that all communities had access to food, no matter if they were all the way out in Waianae or in town, everybody had support that they needed. And so that's where Coalition came about. And we continue to leverage our partnerships and resources today.
And it's wonderful. We did have several organizations just, they sprung up, they wanted to help. A lot of them either started their own little groups or they got involved with other existing groups, but everybody pitched in. And so that was the wonderful thing that came out of COVID, right? Is the community coming together.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think with every challenge, there's also an opportunity. And that's what we got to see with this COVID-19 pandemic response. We saw so much community energy. Everybody was just eager to give everything that they could to meet the need, especially for Kupuna and other vulnerable populations.
And a lot of the talk, I guess, is how and if things will go back to the way it was, quote unquote normal. But I tend to think that we are forever changed in many ways. And even your program, the Kupuna Food Security Coalition, it's not something that's just going to go away because the pandemic's under control, right? And what do you folks have planned, let's say, for the remaining part of this year and in the future?
So when we first formed the coalition, we were focusing mainly on food distribution, right? Making sure the food and meals got to our Kupuna's table. And then we slowly kind of evolved into a more innovative model of, since our foot is already in the door, so many of our Kupuna lack the supports they need, or were experiencing loneliness, or there's so many things that could be done when we have that foot in the door. And so it was a great opportunity for us to make sure that our Kupuna were connected to anything they need. So what that looks like on the ground is maybe one of our partners goes to Mrs. Chun's house down the street, and originally it's to deliver meals. But while they're there, they can see that her lights are on, if she needs to be connected to any other resources, if she wants to join any online programs to connect with others, if she knows how to use the computer. It's a foot into the door for many Kupuna's lives. And, so many of our Kupuna, that was their only guaranteed meal for the day, too. So it really is a privilege for us to enter the lives of our Kupuna. And now that we are entering this new normal, or this next chapter of the pandemic, we are trying to make sure that there are long-term sustainable solutions in place so that the Kupuna we're serving continue to get the support that they need.
What are some statistics you can share with us about either Kupuna who may not be getting enough sustenance in their homes, or maybe some health statistics? Anything you can share with us about that?
Yeah, sure. So, even before the pandemic, food security was still a major issue in Hawaii and nationally, and it was continuing to grow. In Hawaii specifically, we have about 82% higher food costs than the national average. So if you just take that alone, it paints a picture of how difficult it is to live in Hawaii, especially when you're on a fixed income or other barriers that you might face as a Kupuna. And so you also take into context the high cost of living, high poverty rates, low minimum wage. It all creates this compounding effect on our underserved populations. And so not only that, but Hawaii, we're isolated in the middle of the Pacific. We import about 90% of our food, and so when we have emergency situations like the COVID-19 pandemic, it really disrupts our food system. And among the most affected are those vulnerable populations. So specifically for food insecurity, in the pandemic, about 1 in 7 Hawaii residents were food insecure, and we actually ranked 4th in the nation for highest growth in food insecurity, which is not where we want to be, right? But we do see it as an opportunity to strengthen our community food systems to make sure that we're better prepared in the future.
And is that 1 in 4 because of the pandemic and the high cost of shipping, maybe shortage of boats coming here and bringing food? Is that what contributed to that number?
I think it's hard to narrow it down to a single factor because there's so many factors that come into play. But yeah, that's definitely one of them.
So it's a problem that existed before the pandemic, and it was just, I'll say, exposed to be more prevalent and relevant to us that you folks came along as the Kupuna Food Security Coalition to present a solution, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And really, I have to do a shout out to our partners because they were already doing this work.
Definitely.
But our community partners are very committed to the overall health and well-being of our Kupuna. When they see a need, they just go,
Yeah.
they mobilize quickly and make sure that they leverage all the resources and partnerships they can to make sure that need is met. And so we focus specifically on Kupuna because while food insecurity has negative health impacts across the whole lifespan, Kupuna are probably the most affected. Um, and that's partially because a lot of our Kupuna, about 80% or so, have a chronic disease, and so food insecurity, if you don't have reliable access to healthy, nutritious foods, that definitely impacts your health status.
Right. And by the way, if you go to their website at hiphi.org, you go to the Food Security Coalition, and there are your list of partners there. And we can't mention them all, but if people want to find out who is helping out in this effort, they're all there. So that's wonderful. One thing I also wanted to ask is, even personally, we've helped at a food bank, during these months of the pandemic, and we were always wondering if the right people were being served. Because people would come, but I always thought, well, maybe there's people who are immobile who couldn't get there, right? And so, how do you folks keep track of that question? Are the right people being served?
And so that's kind of where we come in as Hi-Fi. We provide kind of that centralized support for that data analysis to make sure that we are hitting the most vulnerable or Kupuna. I will also add that Kupuna are particularly affected by food insecurity because there's additional factors that come into play, whether it's limited transportation or mobility, having a fixed income, having competing financial priorities like medication for those chronic diseases or medical expenses. And plus, throw back to a year ago, we had all of the stay-at-home orders, and maybe they didn't have the social support to ensure that they could get their groceries picked up from the grocery store. And so, separately, I do want to add too that a lot of the folks that we serve, while a lot of them are economically disadvantaged, there's a lot that aren't and still are facing food insecurity. On a national level, over half of the food insecure seniors have income above the federal poverty level. So it kind of shows you that even if you do have income coming in, it doesn't guarantee food access.
Might be paying for shelter, but
Yeah, exactly.
you don't have a lot left over at the end of the month, right?
So that's kind of what we aim at. Food insecurity can be defined in so many different ways, but even if you have access to food one week and not the next, that still means you're food insecure. Or if you have to give up or make sacrifices to meet your food needs, and that's still food insecurity as well.
That's so true. Well, we've been speaking with Lindsay Ilagan. She's the program manager of Kupuna Food Security Coalition, which is a part of the Hawaii Public Health Institute. And when we come back after commercial break, we want to hear a little bit more from her on how our listeners can get involved, either to volunteer or participate in some way monetarily, and how we can help make Kupuna more secure with regard to their food needs. So we'll talk about that right after this commercial break.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Lindsay Ilagan. She's the program manager of the Kupuna Food Security Coalition. And right before the break, it was a great intro about the organization and what you folks are doing for the community and our Kupuna. You mentioned that you folks formed last year due to the pandemic. It's been a year. Kind of give us an update of how things have been since then. Maybe if you have some stats of how many meals you folks have served, and what have you guys? You mentioned expanding, not just food, but you mentioned expanding other services. What are some of these other services?
Sure. So to answer your first question, collectively we're able to serve over 1.2 million meals together.
Wow.
With the support of our funders, so that included the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation, City County of Honolulu, and CARES funds. And we also had support from almost 400 individual donors who wanted to contribute as well. So a huge shout out to them, because if it weren't for them, this definitely wouldn't have been possible. So we were able to link Kupuna up with 30,000 health and wellness checks. And we were at the height of our services, we were serving over 8,000 Kupuna a week. So that's definitely, I think it speaks to the collaboration and willingness to collaborate for all of our partners to make sure that we're building this safety net where all of our kupuna were served and nobody was slipping through the cracks.
I think that's great that you folks expanded that because during that time, everyone was told to stay home, right? Shelter. So Kupuna's health and wellness, those were kind of getting put to the back burner, so to speak. The fact that you guys are expanding that service just to get them, making sure that everything is great, working fine with them. I think that was important. And so going, in 2021, are you folks continuing that? Are you folks expanding to other services? What are your plans?
So I will say up until now we have been pretty Oahu centric, recognizing that there's need all across the state. And so while we have stakeholders from neighbor islands that participate in our coalition, we really want to make sure that for any future funding opportunities or really any of our work, we keep that equity piece in mind to make sure no matter where you live, what language you speak, your economic status, whatever, if you are Kupuna and you're experiencing some barriers to food access, that we're going to meet those barriers and help you overcome them.
You mentioned that Kupuna can look you guys up to if they need any services. What if they're looking to maybe help out or volunteer? How can they do that? Are you folks looking at you mentioned maybe right now you guys are focused on Oahu, like starting to neighbor islands. What would some of the volunteer services you guys would be looking at?
Sure. So there's a couple of different levels of how you can get involved. And so one thing is just if there's any kupuna in your life, just checking in on them because food insecurity isn't always visible at the surface. We pride ourselves on prioritizing our kupuna's needs and making sure that even if you're homebound, for example, you're not invisible. You are part of the backbone of our community, and we want to hear your voice and we want to make sure that your needs are met. And so that's one way, just at a personal level, to get involved is just checking in on your kupuna, even if you don't think they have needs. Just seeing checking if their lights are on, like how I had in that example, or seeing if they have a doctor, or referring them to other services. And there's a couple ways that you could refer somebody who might benefit from services. One way is to go to the Elderly Affairs Division. They have a website, it's elderlyaffairs.com. That's led by the city and county of Honolulu. They have a lot of great resources, including food insecurity, but a lot of wraparound health and social services as well. And then there's also Aloha United Way 211. It's real easy. You can call and they have interpreters too for those who are limited English proficiency, and they can kind of triage whatever needs you have and connect you to the right resources that are geographically appropriate.
Lindsay, I heard you mentioned in terms of the assistance that people will receive, there's a health and wellness check. Is it primarily financial assistance that you folks were able to provide in terms of food security, or how did that work?
So our health and wellness checks, I kind of alluded to it before in my example, but just making sure that the kupuna has their whatever resources they need to live a healthy lifestyle.
Oh, so you're checking in with them?
Yeah, checking in. So whether that's in person when we actually deliver a meal, that's one way. Another way is we have volunteers call and check up on the kupuna, and many people they report their matched kupuna. They look forward to these calls every week, but it's just that regular communication to make sure everything is okay. Do you need anything? Like, how are things going? And if there is a need, then just making sure that they're connected to the resources.
Right. I mean, you become so much more than just somebody who assists with food. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that social connection. It's that friendly face.
Which we've seen is so important, right? Like in the pandemic. Like I know I definitely felt it as a person myself, and I have the ability to go online, so some kupuna maybe don't have that tech savviness.
Right.
So they definitely play a role, and it's a huge opportunity for us to develop these relationships over time. I just want to bring up one quick example.
Sure.
So one of our organizations is called our Kupuna, and they link up with Kupuna to do their grocery shopping, and they also provide they can link the Kupuna up to assistance to get them enrolled in the supplemental nutrition assistance program as well. And so they actually have a program where the shopper or the volunteer can use their SNAP benefits to make sure that they use up their benefit and they're not leaving anything on the table. But we had one volunteer. She was learning how to drive with her mom. She was like practicing, getting her hours in for her driver's test, and just having that regular check-in. Like they celebrated birthdays together, like socially distant birthdays together, and it was just a really heartwarming story to have that relationship blossom over time when that definitely wouldn't have happened without the pandemic. So it was cool to see.
And that's just one of your partner organizations.
Yeah,
and it's called ARC.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I see here on your website, aside from all the different partners, one way that people can get involved is through donations. I guess your organization, although it is funded by the city for the most part, you do have institutional assistance, but also people can privately donate, right? And how do you folks go about doing that? Do you have events, or you just do mailers? How does that work for folks?
So we are accepting individual donations or any kinds of donations on a rolling basis. So more information is available on our website. And so that will go to Hi-Fi. And so what we do at Hi-Fi is we act as that centralized support to make sure those funds get distributed equitably with our partners to make sure that it goes to the areas or the subgroups of Kupuna with the most need.
So they're not designated per se, but it will get to those different areas.
Yeah, it'll directly support Kupuna feeding.
And if somebody wanted to volunteer to get involved with food security, would you then refer them to one of your partner organizations? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so for general inquiries, you can go to our website, which is hifi.org/kupuna, or you can email us at kupunacoalition@hifi.org, or we have a lot of partner organizations that accept volunteers directly, but one of them is Hawaii, and they're actually leading Volunteer Week here in the islands in April.
Right.
But they have a lot of information about where you can get more involved as a volunteer for the Kupuna Food Security Coalition.
And part of what we're talking about this month is not just services that Kupuna receive, but ways that Kupunas can serve. So there's definitely a lot of areas, like we were saying, there's more than 40 organizations that they can have their pick of getting involved with.
Yeah,
and I'm sure they'd be glad to have any assistance possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I will say there's a huge variety of ways you can volunteer. So whether that's actually helping in a commercial kitchen, preparing foods, or picking up foods, or going to the grocery store and doing somebody's grocery shopping, or helping them navigate an online website to get connected to other resources. And then some other ways is just writing. We have letter writing campaigns to send mail to our Kupuna, which is much appreciated, and doing the phone calls or even doing the door-to-door delivery. So lots of various ways. There's pretty much an opportunity for any level of interest.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, we've been speaking with Lindsay Ilagan, who is the program manager of Kupuna Food Security Coalition, and that's part of the Hawaii Public Health Institute. Thank you, Lindsay, for what you do and for being on our show.
Thank you so much for having me and for all that you do at Kupuna Wiki. And real quick shout out to our partners. It wouldn't be possible without them. So much appreciation to them as well.
Coming up next, we have our Kupuna Wiki Classic Trivia. Thank you to all of the participants in last week's Kupuna Wiki Trivia. And the question last week was, how old was Gladys Birrell, the oldest woman to compete in the Honolulu Marathon on December 12th, 2010? The answer is Gladys Birrell was 92 years old when she competed in the marathon, and she had a time of 9 hours and 53 minutes and 16 seconds. So Andrew, there's no excuse. It's coming December.
That's a lot faster than what I would have done.
And now this week's Kupuna Wiki trivia is brought to you by Cheney Brooks Choice Advisors and sponsored by the Kupuna Food Security Coalition.
What high school did former President Barack Obama graduate from in 1979?
For a chance to win a Lost gift card, be the first person to call us with the correct answer at 808-792-5188. We hope everyone is staying safe during this time. And remember, if you want to hear past episodes of the Kupuna Wiki Radio Show, please go to our website at kupunawiki.com, or you can call us to find out more about our service providers at 808-792-5188.
Again, we'd like to thank this segment sponsor, Cheney Brooks Choice Advisors, for providing you with the best real estate information so you can make the most informed decision. As they like to say, real estate is about choice. To contact them, call 753-9033.
Well, thanks for joining us today on the Kupuna Wiki Radio Show, Hawaii's senior resource. We strive to make sure our seniors are informed and supported every step of the way. Again, I'm Brandon.
I'm Andrew.
And we'll see you back next time on the